Jess.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Cayce and I are trying to just normalize the conversation around mental wellness, particularly with high achievers in the entertainment industry and entrepreneurs. Yes, you are a high achiever. I love how everybody's like, I don't know that. I think we all think that, no matter what we're doing.
Did you go the right?
Imposter syndrome is always around the corner, yes. But you and I met about a year ago in person and talked all things Enneagram.
We did.
And it was so
nice
fun.
of you. Yeah.
So fun. And I think we just hit it off and we connected, and we've been following each other and having little side conversations.
And you let me know I was a 7.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if I was a 7 or a 4.
Yeah.
But I'm a 7.
Yeah. And you had some clarity from that, so
Mm-hmm.
that's good. Yeah. So, but you also shared some things that you were doing intentionally to just make sure that you were well, and that you were, at least from what I understand, you're choosing your own lane, saying no to a certain path, and kind of have created your own path. And I just wonder if you would talk a little bit about why you think mental health and this conversation is important for musicians or any entertainer, really.
Yeah. The topic of mental health is really broad, right? I guess it can be anything from just like general wellness to like suffering from a multitude of like many things, like mental illnesses and things like that. So, gosh, and especially even just being down here, I'd say like the number one thing I see people kind of falling into in regards to mental health is like, well, burnout and overwork. That's like a big part of like the culture. I feel like just musicians in general, like it's just play as much as you can all the time, and sometimes it's like you just burned yourself out, like just burning with the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
And then another thing is like alcohol and like how much just alcohol there is there. And some people, like you just see people drink too much, and then kind of coupled with the burnout. And the burnout can also, I feel like, lead to maybe breaking down of like support systems or relationships, because a lot of times it feels like we spend so much time just working and playing gigs instead of having like a more structured regular life where you might have like more time to nurture your support system and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like so many people are just like kind of flying sort of solo, like burning themselves out and just doing as much as they can all the time, and maybe not it's like you really have to take a step back to one thing people say to me like downtown is they'll be like, I've had people like remark like, it's so cool how you like do a lot of different things, and I'm like, what? Because they are just playing all of the time, and we're like, I like make sure to take time to like just do other stuff, like go to the zoo, or like just like really like just stuff that's not even necessarily like productive, just like you have to like, it's like you have to kind of remember to like live a life. Because you really can just work all the time. Because work is also fun, because we're playing music, and it is fun a lot of the time, sometimes. And and it also is a social outlet too. So it's like you can sort of get recharged. Like you see your friends that you're playing with, and you're also, as a front person, putting out a ton of energy, fronting like social and extroverted type energy. And then when you're done with gigs, you're like, I don't want to hang out with anybody. That sounds terrible. Like I want to spend all my time like at home with my fiance and my dog, or by myself, and like maybe like one good friend. And that can happen like when you're just being so social all the time. So it's like I have to really make myself like hang out with people and like socialize and outside of just playing gigs.
Is that because you know that doing that makes you healthy?
Yes, because it makes me grounded. It makes me like feel, gosh, like if I'm just doing music, I'll start to feel like I have no friends, I have no life. Like it's fun that you're playing music, but also the reality is like you're coming down to like this same street or playing in these bars, and this like it can feel gritty It can feel repetitive. Like that's like, you know, everything's got two sides. It can also be really fun and great too. I'm not gonna complain or anything, but it can be like this is all I do. It can really feel like that. So I have to like really like take a step back and try to like take a few days out to go do something and hang out with people and that kind of thing. So I guess that's kind of a big deal. I also don't drink and haven't for a while now, probably like about a year and a half. Yeah. So I was 5 years sober. And then when I moved here, I started drinking again. And now I'm really bad. So I quit drinking. It's been about a year and a half.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. So that's a big part of my personally, like, staying well. Is just basically staying away from drinking.
Well, you don't have to talk about that specifically unless you want to, but that's one of the questions that we have, if you feel comfortable sharing, is can you tell us about a time where you were struggling and you recognized it and then knew that you needed to do something? And
Yeah, I was struggling big time in like 2012. And that I was living in New York City at the time, and I went through like a bad breakup and tried to kill myself, and when I was drunk, and subsequently went to the hospital and then went to rehab, and then I moved to Boston just because I didn't feel like going back to New York, and then I moved to Nashville from there. But yeah, I was struggling majorly, obviously, around then. Yeah, and I never thought that I was an alcoholic. Like, in my mind, I was just like, I'm a musician. Like, you're confused. You're like, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a musician. That's what musicians do. Like, you just don't know a psychiatrist guy. Because it was in the mental hospital where I was diagnosed. My diagnosis was alcoholic at the time. So I went to rehab, and I went to this really nice rehab in Connecticut that my boyfriend's parents at the time sent me to, because my parents were living in Alaska. There's a lot of trying to keep the story narrative central and not throw in too many details. But my parents were living in Alaska at the time. So his parents sent me to rehab, and and that's when I basically just stopped drinking. I did a specific kind of therapy called DBT therapy, and that's been really good for me too, actually. I try to actually always go back to that. I feel like there might be like a little bit of stigma around that because DBT was originally intended for like borderline people, but everybody can benefit from it, especially people who tend to think like in extremes, because that's kind of like what it is. It's like dialectical, like two sides, right? And I had this realization the other day too that was like, every single thing that I really want to do, I also really don't. Like everything, like really. And it's hard, but it's hard because everything has pluses and minuses. So even like getting married, or even like the decisions of how, and just everything. Like, and the bigger it is, the more like charged it is. Like the worse or more amazing. But it's both. And dialectical behavioral therapy kind of helps you like meet yourself.
Like be present.
In the middle, yeah. Yeah, because I can just be like, ooh, like, so, yeah, so that's been helpful. And sometimes I kind of go back to that, refer to that. Another thing is I am in therapy, and I go like every other week. And I pretty much just personally, no one makes me go or anything. I've just decided to do that for the rest of my life, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, that's just something I'll always do, like every other week. And I don't see why not. Like, everybody doesn't just do that. It's just good to have, like, to sort of like check in, kind of keeps you. What else? I don't know if I got off track of the question.
No, I mean, it's great. That's what we're here to talk about, is just, you have such a happy energy about you.
I'm like one of the most depressed people. I'm really, I'm both, right? I'm like so happy and like, but if you catch me on a certain day, yeah, like I've been to the dark side. I've been there, and And I think, but at this point, it's nice because I can relate to like most people.
Well, and that's why we want to normalize this conversation. Like you said, I've been to the dark side.
Yeah.
I've been to the dark side. The person that was just here talked about the dark night of the soul. And someone before that talked about suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
And this is for a lot of people.
And
part of the human experience that
Definitely.
we think is just us. And if anybody knew, and there's so much shame attached to it, like if anybody knew that I had these thoughts, or
Yeah.
you know, we feel guilty about it. But being able to say, when I'm not regulated, my thoughts go dark.
Very much
Can we
so.
just normalize that's a human response?
And if you stay in that place, your behavior will come dark too.
Yes.
And
Oh, I love how you said that.
it's so true though.
Yeah.
And one thing that I feel like was my biggest like from being in a bad place and then getting like better was I thought like, oh, like I'm better now. Like all the bad stuff is behind me. Here's my happy ending. Like now everything's just gonna go my way because I had it bad before and now it's gonna be good. And it's not really like that. Like,
It's
like
ongoing.
yeah, it's ongoing and it's like kind of a part of you that you learn to like control and deal with.
And it's the human experience, right?
Yeah. But like things can get bad again, which I learned when I started drinking again. It's like, I was like, maybe I'm like a different person now. Like that was 5 years ago. I had so many issues, like mental health was all over the place. Now I'm like, good.
So you wrote a song about your experience called Downtown.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and writing Downtown was a lot of, at the time I was just writing it about my life. And I actually thought I was writing it about, I wrote most of it when I was living in New York a long time ago. It's kind of like, has pieces from New York and pieces from now. And the parts I wrote when I lived in New York were, I used to joke that the way that I learned my way around New York City was from like waking up in different people's houses, in apartments. And so I'll wake up downtown. I'm not lost, but I'm not found.
Yeah.
And because generally I would hang out downtown. But yeah, I didn't really, it wasn't about my drinking problem when I wrote it. But when I like listened to it and came back to it a few years later, I was like, this is an alcoholic talking about being an alcoholic. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do from one night to the next. Like I can't like get to roll of the dice. Like ha ha ha, isn't that so funny though? Like, and that was very much like my personality too. Like ha ha ha. Like I have another song I wrote a long time ago called No Self-Control. And I used to say like I wrote it about just being a good time. Like people don't know how hard it is to be like I just thought like happy-go-lucky type of person, but really it was just like having like a substance issue.
Yeah.
It's funny now, but it's like, oh, I didn't see that about myself.
Yeah, but I think that's the whole process of doing the work. Because I could say the same thing. Like
Yeah.
I look back and I'm like, oh, I thought I was just a really good person. Turns out that's a trauma response.
Yeah.
I wasn't putting myself first. And it gets blurred, right? Because we have these conditioned responses.
Yeah.
And we talked about that earlier too, is that when you have trauma that hasn't been healed yet, it comes out as a reaction that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
So how in your journey have you uncovered what was causing the problem? And like, have you learned to heal from that so that you can be healthier? Or have you just decided to be in control of the substance?
This is an interesting question. I'd say a mix of both.
Yeah.
Like, there's an acceptance of just like, I can't drink, like no matter what. Like it's just like, let's just not. So there's that. And that's just settled. Like I'm just not gonna do that.
Right.
Like no matter how healed I ever am, that's just not happening. There's just, it feels like the healing is like whack-a-mole, you know, like one, oh, here's this, oh, here's that.
Yeah.
Like,
It's so true, and it
You know
can
what
be
I
really
mean?
frustrating.
for every year of my life, like
Yes.
childhood down to like,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like it's like,
I do.
oh gosh, you keep uncovering so many things. So it's like, I don't know if you'll ever be like healed or, I don't know, and you can also even have like a long philosophical discussion about what being healed
Sure.
is and means and what it
Yeah.
looks like
Yeah.
in a practical sense. Cause like, you know, it can look so many different ways.
Well, in this situation, I think we talk about it as just being aware and being able to
Yeah.
acknowledge when
Yeah.
something comes up that is, maybe you're not healed from it, but you know that if you're acting out in a certain way,
Yeah.
then
Triggers.
you need to go inward or get out and play and creativity or be hydrated or focus on your breathing or
Yeah.
maybe stop eating as much sugar. Like there's all these things that nobody really talks about.
I know.
And
Yeah, and I come from a family that is like, my parents like do not take care of themselves at all. Like their house is beyond messy. Like it's like mental health messy. Like it's like, oh, this is a serious problem. And they don't do any kind of self-care. Never really did. My mom was a really high achiever. She was like a CEO. My dad was like, I call him a hobbyist. He was more like a stay-at-home dad. Skied and played golf. And but I've seen now too how just talking about all those small things, like I'm not hydrated or sugar and stuff like that. I always equated like people who are successful like are perfect, right? They do all those things. They just innately do. And that's like so not true because I've seen people, you know, who are very successful, like, just by conventional money or a good job or whatever. And they're like hot messes, hot messes. And that always like catches up with you. I think you can almost deal with like Johnny Depp, Amber Heard too. Like that kind of stuff, it comes out and it catches up with you. It will take you down. Like, and I watched it with my parents, and I've just seen it with other people. Like that self-care stuff it's like everything.
Yeah.
It's not stuff, right?
It's not stuff.
Yeah, it's a foundation.
It's completely foundational, and you can make all the money you want and become so successful or reach the heights, but if you don't have some sort of foundation of that, you'll lose it, or you'll burn yourself. Like you will, or literally like die. Like it's that serious. It really, really is. And yeah, that's really not talked about that much too. It's like
That's what we're talking about.
just thinking about like, oh, but because really successful people like are not perfect. A lot of them are like really messed up actually.
Yeah.
Because all the sacrifices you'll make to just go, get it. And then you get there and you're like, oh my gosh, like,
Was that worth it?
I'm a wreck. Yeah.
Well,
But-
and I think a lot of high achievers, a lot of creatives, a lot of entertainers, entrepreneurs are running towards something and away from something, right? And then we have culture telling us, yeah, go get the carrot and everything will be fine. And then they get the carrot and they get more carrots, and then they're miserable, like it's not enough. This is it.
Yeah.
This is it. And you get the 7 minutes of that rush, and it's like that's it. And I want to. That's why we're having this discussion. I want to undo that lie. Like we want people to be wildly successful, live an abundant life, but also be fulfilled and content and happy and, unapologetically go to the zoo on a Wednesday. Go, like that's you call the shots.
Yeah.
Like, why not? But it's that lie of when you're successful, everything else will be fine. And if you have trauma in your childhood, especially,
Yeah.
it's a disaster. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Because you get into, like you said, what you're willing to sacrifice. And if you learn that in childhood, and then you're sacrificing and giving everything you have, and the further you get into your success, especially, I think you would attest in the entertainment industry, it becomes all-consuming, where people will start to take advantage of you. You've got people who don't want you well because they're making money off you, right? And so you have to choose yourself, because nobody else out here is going to.
Yeah.
So if we could finish on a question,
Okay.
what 2 or 3 tools or advice would you give to other entertainers and high achievers to encourage them to make their mental wellness a priority?
My personal opinion is number one, I would say, like, if I'm just completely putting my worldview on, like, just this is my opinion of what I think you should do.
Yeah.
Is I think you should have a therapist and also like a life coach, like rack them up, like you.
Rack 'em
all
up,
the
I like
helpers,
it.
yeah, like a masseuse, like any sort of helper, like type thing, like lean into that,
I love
all of that, right? All of that, like a virtual assistant, any of that stuff. Like the more like kind of people you can have around you, I feel like that you can lean on.
Yeah.
Do that. 2 or 3 things. Let's see. Sleeping. That's a tough one though.
It is tough in your industry, isn't it?
Yeah, because also just quite literally, like, I don't have a regular schedule. Like, tonight I finish at 10. You know what I mean? Like, then, like, coming up in June, I have, like, tons of, like late shifts that, like, it's all over the place. And it's, like, you can get very dysregulated quite literally very fast, especially if you're, like, drinking and stuff. But, I feel like I should say, like, exercise, too, but I don't do that enough. Meditation too, another one that I don't really do enough. Journaling, that's another one when I'm good, I'm doing it every day, and then I like fall kind of off. For me too, actually, is keeping like as clean as I can of a space. I'm a little bit messy. I grew up in a really messy house, and for me, keeping like relatively organized, I'm never gonna be like but keeping like relatively organized is like very important. If I'm off the rails, like if I'm just like which I might be a little bit right now, but it's usually because like I haven't worked out in like a week and there's like clothes everywhere, like from like getting ready and leaving, and just like the closet's like there's dishes in the sink, and it's like I haven't.
You're unregulated.
Yeah, it's dysregulated because you need time to do that stuff, and if you're going too fast, it all just gets like, and then you need even more time to pick up the big mess you made. Like once, so and I guess I don't know where I probably said like 5 or 6 or 7 things, but another good thing would be like I just like systems and routine, like as much as you can. Like just deciding like this is how I'm gonna do this, and I do this every Wednesday, and I do this every Thursday. As much as you can, try to systemize and be like, this is what I'm doing now. For me, I am like I naturally am. I try not to be so much, but I naturally am kind of a black and white thinker, which can be negative, but it can be positive because I can change a habit pretty quick. If I am like,
Sure.
if I see it, I'm like, this is what I do now.
Yeah. So, Jess, you have offered us so much insight as far as the intentionality of what it takes to, what I call stay vertical. Right? And you're staying vertical.
As someone who's definitely been horizontal.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure. 1,000%. It's true. It's true. I know all about it. I have to do all the things.
Right.
For me, it's not just like a luxury, right? Like, oh, I'm going to drink my green juice and wake up at 6. Like, no, it's like life or death.
But that's a great point, because that's what I was going to say. I think that's a misnomer that we often have when we see somebody who looks put together, and they're doing their meditation and they're journaling and they're taking their walks and working out. We assume that like they just get it. They have it easier. Like they're just better than us, right? But it's doing the consistent thing even when you don't want to create the life that you want.
Yeah.
And I'm just particularly inspired by, your authenticity of where you've been and your willingness to show up for yourself first. And I know, you know your nose, and in an industry that could just flatten you and get you right back horizontal like that. And I ultimately, my desire is just to have a positive impact on the industry, to shift that and make it not normal to have people not sleeping, where we can just consume from the artists and the creatives. And it starts with these conversations, and it starts with the creatives doing their work Like it's going to shift. It's powerful, and I think it's more powerful than you even realize, because it's up against a really what's the word I'm looking for? An industry that it just gets away with what it gets away
Right,
with.
it's okay for everyone to be unhealthy.
It's normal, and it's almost beneficial to the people who are making money in the industry the more success you get. And I just love partnering with people like you and, you know, like Cayce, having these conversations that we're gonna start pushing back, and we're gonna take care of ourselves, and I think over time it will change, and we can have a positive impact, and you're doing it. And so
Oh, thank you.
you're doing the work of a warrior, like I always say. Like, good job, and keep showing up for you first. And thank you for just having this conversation and normalizing the human experience from a creative's perspective.
I will say too, like, this sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's just like the truth that, like, it sounds like such a weird thing to say, but it's just true. In that more people like have been to the mental hospital than you think.
Oh yeah.
Like, but people don't like put it on Facebook. Well, some do, but and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think it's like actually like, wow, that's like cool. Like, but more people have done that, visited there, than like you would realize. Like, it's not actually that like crazy. Like, you almost definitely probably know someone like who's had an issue and had to, and had to get help, like maybe serious help. So yeah, it really, like, if you're going through that, like, a lot of people go through that.
But
so.
here's the one thing I really want to focus on about what you just said, is that you've been on both sides of that. Like you said, you've been horizontal, you've been vertical. And you've been horizontal in the hospital, suicidal. And now you're not this mentally ill person who's powerless. You are showing up every day.
Here's another weird thing.
I know it's not perfect, but I'm
Yeah.
going to show up every day for me.
Yeah.
And guess what? You're sitting here on your way to another gig, writing more songs, even, you know, doing other things you love.
Yeah.
And not in the
Another,
hospital.
oh, just a quick like weird thing about that journey too, like the often like you don't expect or even realize or notice is like the people around you. Like when you get so low, like when I was in that place, like when I was in rehab and then I lived in like a halfway house for a hot second, like then I was in preschool. I was getting a lot of help, and I was sort of like, you know, living like that for about a year or two before I started like getting better and better. But there are people like who, when as you get better and better, like don't really like to see it all the time, and it's weird. Like some people get used to you being like sick or like a victim. And then when you're like strong and like kind of like a different person, sort of, they're like, it's almost like renegotiating like a different relationship.
Yeah. Someone else was talking about that today. Like you lose friendships.
It's
in the
weird.
process.
Like you wouldn't think that, but it is. It's like it's another whole other dynamic.
Yeah. Well, I think it shines a light.
Yeah.
Right? It shines a light, and we have a choice. Like I'm either going to move away from you because I'm not ready. I'm not there on my journey yet. I'm not ready, and you're bringing up some stuff in me I don't want to look at. Or it's like, I want what you have. What are you doing? Tell me more.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what we're wanting to do is, okay, we want to inspire people to want more for themselves, whether, you know, no matter where they're at in their career.
Yeah. More in like a holistic
Yes,
more.
not more
Not
money
the
or
capitalism
fame.
more, right?
Yes,
Because that's what
Thank
makes
you
us
for clarifying that, yes.
Yeah.
And also too, I think it's just having the awareness that if that jealousy or that frustration in other people seeing you be healthy comes up, you know that they're still struggling. And it's really more of a reflection that they still need more work to get to the point to where they can have that sense of control like you can have. And then you can just you get to keep being that example and that leader in that situation.
Yeah, and it's like a big part is self-trust, and even like thinking something like that takes self-trust, because those people aren't going to be like, I'm struggling with you doing well. Like no one's going to say that, right? Well, maybe like a really self-aware person like might, and that would be really cool. But most of the time, people don't. They just are like, or you are like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it does take self-trust to like, and self-awareness too, to sort of see, like I've been through phases in my life where I've been a toxic person or like super triggery or all that. So when I see it in other people, I can usually be like, oh, I know about that. Like, sucks for you. Like, I've been there, feel for you, but like I can see that because I've like been through that. And so it's sort of like, I don't know, it's kind of maturity too, but like being able to trust yourself and trust what you've been through to be able to see it also in others and let them grow and not take things so personally.
Yeah. Well, I want to say to both of you on that point, like you said, maturity. I think the younger you are and you do this work, and that's why I'm inspired because I have like 20 years on each of you, maybe more, I don't know. But starting younger before you have a family, if that's your choice, you are shifting the entire lineage of your family. You are healing generational trauma, and that's a big freaking deal.
That is, you're right. I never really thought of that. I wish my mother had like gone to therapy ever, but like, yeah. Or
and
like
again, it doesn't mean it's perfect, but we're shifting away from the normalcy of dysfunction and toxicity and numbing out, and we're coming alive, and that's exciting. So thank you for the work that you're doing, not just in the industry, and I love your music, and I love your vibe, and I've told you I love your voice, you know, but thank you for the work that you're doing within yourself, because if you weren't doing that, everything else would just be...
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You guys are so nice. Thank you.
Thank you for
for
being
having
part of
me.
this conversation.
Yeah.
All right.